All right, everyone. Well, we're back for the last time with the Crown Vic. I'm going to do a little final walk around with this just to show what the build was on the car and give other guys an idea of what was done to it. So if they want to kind of replicate or echo any of that stuff, they can do that. The car is being retired. It met an early demise at the last race. It's fixable, but I mean the car had enough issues with rust in the frame that it's just kind of not really worth it. So I'm going to be stripping this one down. I'll get the LS and the 6L90 trans out of it, and whatever else I can to salvage. And that's all going to move over to the new race car, which I will reveal at a later date. So, but anyway, let's get on to this. So, it's a 2002 Ford Crown Victoria P71. As I mentioned, the engine is a LS, so it's a 4.8 liter L20 out of a 2011 Chevy Express 1-ton van. The ECU, the wiring harness, and the transmission also came from that same donor. So it's a 6L90 6-speed automatic transmission. I did have to have the drive shaft shortened slightly, and I also had to have a new slip yoke put on the transmission side of the Ford drive shaft. So it's still the aluminum Crown Vic drive shaft with the appropriate slip yoke put on the transmission side, and then still retaining the factory yoke on the differential side. Let's see here. Tires and wheels. We have some, what are these? They're 18 by 10 and a half? 10 and a half or 11, I can't remember now. Kansai Astros, and they have believe it's an 18 offset. I do have a 1-inch spacer on them. Let me come around the other side where there's some decent light. So these have a 1-inch spacer, and then we are running, let's see here, 295 40 18s on here. Okay, so they're pretty meaty. Up front here, we've got plenty of room on the sway bar. At full lock, there is enough space, but it was close. And then we still have, it's still the stock coil springs in here. I don't know if this is going to adjust so you can see. Come on, do it. No. Anyway, stock coil springs, but they were cut down an inch. Or I should say cut down one coil. So it gave me about an inch of drop initially. After racing it for a bit, it kept dropping. So I'm assuming these coils are pretty worn out. I did actually even have to trim out the fenders at the racetrack here because, I don't know if you'll be able to see here, they were actually cutting into the tire just a sliver when we were going over bumps. So I had to break out the grinder and the wheel, cutoff wheel, and trim this open a little bit to give me enough clearance to clear the tires. Let's see here. The shocks are Bilstein HDs at all four corners. Being this is a 2002, it does have the older suspension instead of the 2003 up cars, which had the aluminum subframe and the kind of the McPherson strut setup and rack and pinion steering. So this has the old school coil spring and shock separate, an old school steering box, and and a steering gear. Yeah, same thing, steering box, steering gear. You know what I mean. So that, let's see here, what else? Set up underneath the car. This still has a factory fuel tank. Factory fuel tank, and then I did run AN lines, so I got some AN adapters to go onto the factory fittings for the tank. And then I ran all AN lines from the tank to the filter, which is just down underneath here, and then all the way up to the fuel rails on the engine. That's easy to do, so that's an easy upgrade if you want to switch from the annoying plastic lines, which work fine and they're cheap, but if you ever have to replace one or splice one, they're a pain in the ass to work with. Let's see here, what else? I think, the rear control arms, or trailing arms, I guess, whatever you want to call them. I built those from some aluminum threaded tubing, and then used heim joints on the ends. You can also buy a kit from ADTR that will basically do the same thing. And then I've also got I built Watts Link arms for it as well, same concept. And then it's got the ADTR sway bars underneath there. So the sway bars made an unbelievable difference in how this car handled. It handled decent before with the Bilstein shocks, but the old springs, it was pretty wallowy in the corners. The sway bars made this thing corner completely flat. It was crazy. So if you're looking for a quick and easy suspension upgrade to make your Crown Vic handle, that is your answer right there. I would do the sway bars before you do anything else. So that's kind of the gist of it under the car. Oh, wait, one more thing. So this LS has some shorty headers on it. The headers, with the 6L90 transmission, I had to make a custom cross member, which is essentially just a piece of aluminum C-channel, really heavy C-channel. So that goes straight across the bottom of the car. There's no bends or dips or cutouts in it or anything. It just goes straight across. So that caused an issue with exhaust clearance. Going under it would have caused the exhaust to hang way low, which I did not want for obvious reasons. So instead, I went up above the cross member, and that in turn caused a clearance issue with the floor. So, oh, hey, weird. We got some, there we go. So I ended up cutting out a big section of the floor in the trans tunnel and put in this piece of aluminum and just boxed it in. So now the exhaust runs up underneath here, fairly close, but it gets me up above the cross member and gets things up and out of the way. So we got lots of clearance under the car. And then the exhaust just ends up turning out right here. So, and it's all from the shorty headers. It goes into dual 2.5-inch tubing, which then comes to right around here. It comes into a Y. So the Y is dual 2.5-inch into a single 3-inch out, and then it's just single 3-inch all the way out. And there's a single Dynomax race bullet muffler underneath there, which is loud. Oh my God, it's loud, but it sounds really good. Let's see here. Typical race car fare inside the battery. Maybe not so typical, but this is a little Life P04 battery. And these we can run in like the 24 Hours of Lemons and Lucky Dog and whatnot. We can run these without a container. Other types of batteries, you have to have them fully enclosed and sealed. These you do not, because they don't have the propensity to set themselves on fire like a regular lithium battery, but you can still reap the advantages of, you know, this is a 4.5-pound battery, and it's the size of my hand, basically. Just tiny, very small footprint, extremely light, and has enough juice to turn over the LS no problem. And then, yeah, so the only thing you're really giving up here is the storage, you know, so you're not going to be able to run the car on accessories, or run accessories on the car without the vehicle being running for a long period of time. where you would be able to with like a regular battery. So there's the ECU up there on the firewall, wiring, more wiring. This is, let's see, come around the other side again here. And so you can see the panel. There's the emergency cutoff, the main power switch. The panel here, so we've got an air-fuel ratio gauge. We've got our ignition panel, fuel pump radiator switch, ignition switch, and that's the push to start. And then we've got switches for the cool suit and helmet blower. And then we've got the relays, 2 fuses, and then our main fuse block down there. A little USB charger, and that I use that to run the tablet, because there's a tablet that sits there in front of the driver, and that tablet runs torque flow, so we can see gauges, we can see what's going on with the vehicle, engine temps, oil pressure, et cetera, anything that we can pull from the ECU for data, we can display on that tablet with the app. Steering wheel, quick release. Okay, so that pulls off. This we never got hooked up, so if you see here, there's actually paddle shifters on this. Okay, I didn't get time to get that all wired up. And then there's also a little display there. Okay, so that display, the same concept as the tablet. I can display, I'd probably use this to display things like what gear we're in, or engine RPM, or we can have it scroll and give information on different things as you're driving. So that's really, really handy. I'm really excited to get the paddle shifter set up on the next car, because that's going to be pretty freaking sweet, I think. And the whole reason for doing that, as opposed to like just putting a manual in it, is because my wife also drives the car, and she is not a fan of, I shouldn't say she's not a fan, she's just not experienced with manual transmissions, so this was just the easier way to go. That being said, also for the 6090 transmission, we have a floor shifter here, and this is out of a Cadillac ATS or something I just found on eBay. Basically, all you need is a shifter that will go from park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then a manual setting. Okay, so that's how this one is set up. So once I get past drive and put it in manual, you can then utilize the paddle shifters. Or like for her, she can just put it in drive and call it a day and get out there and tear around the track. Because of the LS swap, we switched over to a different gas pedal or throttle pedal. So this one is a pedal out of a Corvette. The wiring was changed up to get everything to talk correctly, get the pedal to talk to the ECU the way it needs to. And then we have a Willwood brake pedal set up because we have dual master cylinders under the hood for manual brakes. Okay, and there's the little switch for the brake lights. So when this pedal is pressed, that opens the circuit, and then that tells the brake lights to turn on, and it runs through a relay, and it works really well. Took quite a bit of figuring to get it done, but once I asked a few guys online, Facebook, whatnot, I finally got it figured out. And yeah, it's been working awesome. So, what else here? The window net, full containment race seat. That is on a slider too, so we can slide that back and forth as needed. And roll cage, obviously. Fire suppression, this is the one for the safety crew. And then there's one right here for the driver, so it's within easy reach for the driver. Also circling back to the brakes. This is the bias control for the brakes. So with that Willwood setup, we can turn the knob left or right, and we can dial in the front or rear brake bias using that knob. Okay, back to here. We've also got this little guy here. That's a blower for the helmets. So this tube, you can take it, hook it up to the top or the side of your helmet, wherever your hookup is there on your helmet, and then you can have fresh air blowing into your helmet. Fire suppression bottle. So you see all these hoses or tubes going all over the car. Those are for the fire suppression. So you pull one of these two guys, that guy blasts your juice or whatever the hell it is onto, in this case, onto the gas tank, two into the engine bay, and one onto the driver. The ones in the engine bay spray onto the exhaust manifolds, basically the hottest part of the under the hood there. What else? We also have the cooler for the cool suit. Another fancy little gadget here. So this guy, you basically put ice in here and some water, and then it has a bilge pump in there that pushes the cold water through these tubes, which are then hooked up to your cool shirt, okay, via these guys, all right, and then that shirt has all kinds of little tubing sewn into it, and it basically cools you off. So if you're, out somewhere hot, say Colorado, Southern California, wherever, and it's 95 degrees out, and you're on a racetrack on top of it in a hot race car, you're not sweating to death. Let's see here, but you can see kind of what we're dealing with here. That the car was just honestly really rusty. It came from Iowa, spent its whole life on Iowa. It was a DOT car. It had a crap ton of rust. This is kind of a blessing in disguise. And I'm going to pull off the hood here too, so we can take a quick look under there. Hang on a sec. I can get it off by myself. Or at all. Things are a bit tweaked. Yeah. Alright, so stay there. Under the hood. So here you can see the dual master cylinders. So obviously one for front, one for rear. And that worked really, really well, honestly. Getting rid of the ABS and getting rid of the brake booster and the single master cylinder, moving to this system, it worked awesome. And part of that may have been the size of the tires, may have just been those alone, I don't know, but those, and then I have just the factory style brake calipers and brake rotors, and then a race compound brake pad on there. And these are the Rebestis ST45 pads on the front and the ST43 pads in the rear. Fantastic pads. If you do any road racing, this is basically the go-to. But I had zero brake lockups or any issues like that with the brakes. Worked absolutely fantastic. We have, let's see, what else we got going on under here? Some braided lines there. These I bought pre-made lines from Earl's. Those worked well. You just have to figure out what ends you need on them. There's the shorty headers. Those were for a, what the heck was it, an S10 LS swap deal, and these are Flotex. Fit awesome. No real issues there. And what the hell? I just noticed that. That is interesting. Oh, you know what that is? The bushing came apart there. Huh. Well, that's not good. Okay, moving on. Power steering. So we had to basically make a AN line for the power steering pump because we are still using the Ford steering box, but this is the pump off of the LS engine. So there was some figuring there to basically just got the AN fittings we needed and adapters, and then made an AN line for the pressure side. Front of the engine, you've got, this is a truck engine, so it still has all the truck pulleys on it. And yeah, so that's the spacing there. We did actually shear off the pump pulley, or the pulley shaft. We sheared that off inside the pump during the race. So we had to fix that. That's why this looks brand new. And then, let's see here. That was wild. Driver came in, the shaft had sheared off, we lost the belt, ended up blowing one of the radiator hoses off, so it was just fluid everywhere. The car was steaming like crazy. It was a mess. But that was pretty wild that shaft sheared off just for whatever reason. I assume probably the RPMs were too much for it, so that's going to be the next step on the race car for the engine, is to get an underdrive set up on there so we're not over revving the accessories, the alternator and the power steering pump and the water pump even. Basically the engine is completely stock. The only thing that's not stock were the headers, and that is really it. There's no performance parts on it. Internally there's some changes in the oil pan just for oil control. So there's a crank scraper in there, there is a baffled oil pan, and there is also a new windage tray. So I had zero issues with oil starvation, so that seems to be working out the way I had hoped. Had to come up with an air intake setup, so I pieced together some tubing and elbows and connectors and splices, and then built this little air box. And then from the front side, you can see the front of the filter if I back up. So that worked pretty well. I did have some mesh in here, screen door mesh, that worked, but it was probably a little too light. I'll need to use a heavier material next time. Here is the cooler. This is the oil cooler. This is actually a Jegs XHP series stacked plate cooler, which I believe is the same as the B&M, but this was like $70 or something, so it was a pretty good price for what I got. And then down here is the TrueCool 14K cooler that I'm using for the transmission. And then underneath that was a hand-me-down cooler that I use for the power steering cooler. Yeah, everything seemed to run pretty cool. Didn't have any overheating issues with anything. Let's see here. Also, in terms of oil pan, I don't know if you're going to be able to see any of this, but down there, let's see here, I don't know if you can bear with me a second. Right in there, see that in and out? That is the adapter that goes onto the oil pan for the in and out oil lines. Those oil lines run back across the firewall and come into the filter, which then comes back around, down to the front and goes to the oil cooler, which then comes back and circles back to the pan. So that extra capacity and the oil circulating through those lines helps it cool a little more also, and also gives it a little more capacity. Same with the trans cooler setup. So, I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. You know, suspension pieces, like I said, are fairly stock, except for the Bilstein shocks. The 80TR sway bars are the big one, and otherwise everything else in terms of steering and stuff is pretty stock. All the joints, the tie rod ends, things like that, ball joints, etc. Those are all stock style components. No crazy racy stuff going on there. So, radiator. The stock Ford radiator probably could have made it work, but we had, let's see here, I believe it was the inlet on this side and the outlet on that side, which would have been okay for the outlet, but the inlet, I would have had a hose running all the way across the front here and trying to figure out how to get it under this, and I was like, you know what, I think I'm just going to get a new radiator because that's going to be a hell of a lot easier, and it was. So this is just a Champion brand radiator that I got in the dimensions I needed, with the inlet and outlet on the correct side, and I got it at a somewhat local race shop. It was like $230, I think. So not terrible. It worked well, and yeah, I mean, had this car remained intact, moving on, the next step would have been probably some coilovers, or at least stiffer springs, and yeah, really starting to focus on the suspension is what would have been happening next. But as it is, that's what we got. So this engine and transmission will now go into that little darling over there underneath the tarp, which I'm not going to reveal just yet, but maybe you can get an idea from the silhouette there. And then that's the Beamer over there, the 2002 TII. So the year is a 74, but the model is 2002 TII. So anyway, so now we're going to start gutting it. We're going to pull everything out of it, all the parts, pieces, cut out the roll cage, wheels and tires come off. I'll take everything that I can salvage and use on the next car, and I'll use it, and everything else is essentially going to go to scrap unless I can sell it. So, yeah, say bye. So that's the end of the road for this one, but definitely not the end of the road for the failed contraception racing team. So we will be building again, and we'll stand by, and you'll have to wait and see what's coming next. So thanks for watching, guys.